You're just a little too old school for where we're headed. We need someone who can innovate. My name is Hunter Donnelly. I'm 62 years old, and until this morning, I was the chief financial officer at Meridian Manufacturing. For the past 15 years, I helped steer the company from a modest, family-run operation in Cincinnati into a publicly traded enterprise with 18 plants across the Midwest. I'd weathered 2 recessions, 1 acquisition that nearly derailed us, and more boardroom drama than I care to recount. I wasn't flashy. I didn't wine and dine investors. But our filings were always on time, our numbers never raised a single red flag, and we built a reputation for reliability. Then Travis Mercer showed up. He was 36, all swagger and sound bites. Designer blazers, limited edition sneakers, buzzwords in every sentence. He was the board's idea of the future. They brought him in as CEO 3 months ago, and within weeks, he was reorganizing everything in sight, talking about synergy, alignment, disruption, and something about redefining velocity. I knew what was coming the minute he booked a one-on-one meeting. "The market's evolving, Hunter," he said as he lounged back in my office chair. My chair, feet crossed on my desk like it was already his. "We need someone who speaks the language of modern finance." I didn't say much. Just gave a polite nod and offered a firm, final handshake. "We're bringing in Zachary Hughes," he continued. "Brilliant guy. He's 29, just at a TEDx talk on financial transformation. It's going viral." "I see," I said calmly. "When's the transition?" Travis looked mildly surprised by my composure. 2 weeks. We'll make the announcement at the next board meeting." That afternoon, while the rest of the staff sat in an all-hands meeting about our bold new direction, I packed to my office. 15 years of work, all reduced to a single cardboard box. A few framed family photos. A commemorative coin from our IPO. The leather-bound portfolio my wife, Patricia, gave me before she passed. As I walked out, I caught sight of Bethany from accounts standing by the elevator. Her eyes were red. She'd been with me since the start. "Don't worry," I told her. "It's just the cycle." What I didn't tell her was that I'd spent the last 6 months quietly keeping tabs on a growing list of financial irregularities, small at first, but growing, ever since Travis took the reins. I wasn't planning revenge. I was doing my job, even if nobody had asked me to, even if they thought I was already irrelevant. I grew up working in my father's hardware store in Covington, Kentucky, just across the river from Cincinnati. He taught me early, numbers don't lie, even when people do. I stocked shelves by day, balanced the books by night, and put myself through college without ever leaving home. I got job offers after graduation, bigger firms in bigger cities, but I chose to stay local, to build something here. I worked my way up through a few regional businesses before I got a call from Harold Phillips, the founder of Meridian, in the middle of the 2008 recession. "I need someone who cares if the books balance," Harold said. "Someone who knows how to keep the lights on." So I joined. For the first 10 years, Harold and I worked side by side, turning Meridian into something durable. When he retired, he handed the reins to Diana Wright, a steady leader who respected process. We didn't always agree, but she listened. Under her, we grew, modestly, sustainably. No drama. Then Diana retired. And the board, eager for something fresh, brought in Travis Mercer. Harvard MBA. Former executive at a Silicon Valley startup that had plenty of press coverage and not a dollar of profit. From day one, the culture began to shift. The first red flag came in week 2. Travis bypassed our procurement process to hire a flashy marketing firm, run by one of his business school classmates, at 4 times our usual budget. When I raised a concern, he just smiled. "We're thinking bigger now, Hunter. Those old constraints, they don't apply anymore." The second red flag came when he shuffled the reporting structure, rerouting financial oversight through his newly created Chief Innovation Officer. That person reported directly to him, not me. The third? I overheard him on a call describing our accounting practices as a little too old-fashioned, saying the books needed more creative solutions. That's when I started watching more carefully. Small things. Vendor payments routed through new shell accounts. Consulting invoices that didn't align with contracted services. Bonuses reclassified as operational expenses. None of it large enough to trigger alarms on their own. But cumulatively, it painted a very different picture. So I documented. Quietly. Diligently. It wasn't about making a scene. It was about making sure that if Meridian collapsed under the weight of innovation, someone would know when the cracks started and who caused them. Because my father didn't just teach me to balance books. He taught me not to flinch when the numbers didn't add up. The irregularities began to pile up. Vendor contracts with companies I couldn't verify, consultancy fees with no corresponding deliverables, and budget reallocations that bypassed department head approvals. At first, I flagged them mentally. Then I began noting them down. I wasn't the only one who noticed. Kevin, one of our internal auditors, stopped by one evening as I reviewed our quarterly statements. The office was quiet, most of the staff gone. There's something off with the tech investment tracking, he said quietly. The numbers don't match between the initial entries and the executive summaries. Document everything, I told him. Keep it clean, keep it factual. Patricia would have told me to make noise, to call out in a board meeting, put it on record, and walk away with my chin high. But cancer took her 3 years ago, and with her went a certain fire. I'd grown more methodical, more patient. So instead of confrontation, I opened a new folder. I started downloading questionable transactions, cross-referencing inconsistencies. I didn't talk. I didn't raise red flags. I simply built a record, silently, precisely, while showing the same steady face in meetings, even as Travis brought in more of his people and systematically pushed mine out. It wasn't paranoia. The patterns were too frequent, too deliberate. Something bigger was happening, and it all seemed to center around one name, Zachary Hughes. My final board meeting lasted 22 minutes. No speech, no parting words, no plaque or token of thanks. Just an agenda item, CFO transition update. Travis delivered it like a sales pitch, all smiles and buzzwords. I sat at the far end of the table and listened. William Foster, the board chair, couldn't quite meet my eyes. He'd been there when Harold hired me, when Meridian was just trying to stay afloat. I'd expected something from him, even if it was only a nod to the years I'd given. But instead, he nodded at Travis's updates on capital strategy like they were gospel. The meeting moved briskly on to the next item. Plan for the new downtown headquarters Travis wanted to build, a flagship symbol of our next chapter, he called it. As people filed out, William paused by my chair. You've been an asset, Hunter, he said, patting my shoulder awkwardly. Best of luck. An asset, like a forklift. Something useful, now depreciated. I returned to what was now Zachary's office to collect my box. Through the glass wall, I could see Travis showing him around, pointing to graphs and dashboards I developed as if they were some artifact from another era. Bethany was waiting at my door, an envelope in hand. The accounting team took up a collection, she said. We wanted to give you a proper send-off dinner. I thanked her quietly, knowing I wouldn't go. As she turned to leave, I stopped her. Bethany, when did invoices from Vertex Solutions start appearing? She tilted her head, thinking. February, I think. Right after Mr. Mercer announced the Digital Transformation Initiative. February, 2 weeks before Travis first mentioned bringing in Zachary. That night, I cleared off my dining room table and laid everything out. 6 months of data. Invoices for services never rendered. Foreign consulting fees with no attached documentation. Transactions routed through shell companies. All of it stacked into tidy rows. But the trail didn't stop there. It all pointed to a holding company called Alpine Innovations, registered just 3 days before Travis was announced as CEO. It was all clear now. Travis hadn't brought in Zachary because I was too old school. He brought him in because I was in the way. They were siphoning money through fake vendors and padded consulting contracts, burying the trail under broad-sounding initiatives like digital transformation. They didn't need a modern CFO. They needed someone who wouldn't ask questions, someone who wouldn't notice. And I noticed everything. I sat back in my chair, looking at the evidence spread in front of me. For the first time since Patricia died, I felt something sharp cut through the dullness that had followed her absence. Not anger exactly. Something colder, more precise. Focus. I opened my laptop and began organizing everything. Transaction logs, vendor profiles, shell company records, cross-reference timelines, payment trails. I wasn't going to confront Travis. I wasn't going to call a press conference or storm into another board meeting. That would have been noise. This would be precision. Going to the press, that wasn't my style. I'd always believed in letting the numbers speak for themselves. This time, I just needed to make sure the right people were listening when they did. A week after my departure, I made the decision to reach out to William Foster directly. Despite his distant farewell, he had always been fair with me. He deserved a chance to address this before it spiraled into something worse. I left a message with his assistant. Nothing urgent, just a request to discuss a few financial concerns for my final weeks at Meridian. He returned my call the next day. His voice was polite but guarded. "Hunter," he said, "good to hear from you." There was a pause. "Travis mentioned you might reach out." My stomach tightened. "Did he?" "Yes. He said you were having some difficulty letting go. Said there were concerns about the new reporting systems. Zachary's already addressed most of it, I believe." "William," I said carefully, "there are irregularities that predate Zachary's arrival. Significant ones." There was a long silence on the line. "Look, Hunter, I know this must be difficult. 15 years is a long time with one company. But the board has full confidence in Travis. Zachary's made improvements already. The systems you have flagged, they're being modernized." "That's not. I've got another call." "I'm afraid," he cut in. "Maybe we can catch up at the holiday party? I hear you're still on the invite list." His tone had that practice finality. The line went dead before I could say another word. The next morning, an email landed in my inbox. It was from Meridian's legal department. The language was courteous, but the message was unmistakable. Any claims of financial impropriety made without substantial evidence could be considered defamatory. A soft threat wrapped in polite legalese. They also reminded me, ever so kindly, of my continuing confidentiality obligations. They were closing ranks. Travis had expected I might notice the discrepancies, and he'd made sure to poison the well before I could speak. If I looked like a disgruntled ex-employee, my claims would fall flat. I needed another route. I reached out to Kevin from Internal Audit. He'd been on my team for 8 years, detail-oriented, loyal, and sharp. If anyone else had noticed what I had, it would be him. We met at a quiet diner well away from downtown. Kevin looked tense the moment he walked in, eyes flicking around the room like he expected someone to be watching. "They promoted me," he said, sliding into the booth across from me. "Congratulations," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "Reporting to Zachary," he said. "New title. Big raise. How's that going?" He stared into his coffee. "They've changed everything. Reporting systems, software protocols. Zachary says it's streamlined, efficient. And is it?" He looked up, face drawn. "Hunter, I can't talk about this. They had me sign additional NDAs. And they're watching everyone who was close to you." I nodded slowly. "They're saying things," Kevin added, "about why you left." "What things?" He lowered his voice. "That you were resisting necessary changes. That you made mistakes in last quarter's report. That Zachary had to clean up your mess. Some people are even saying there were ethical concerns." I gripped my coffee mug so tightly I thought the ceramic might crack. "They're rewriting my story," I said flatly. Kevin looked ashamed. "I should go," he said, throwing some bills on the table. "I've got a mortgage. Twins starting college next year. I can't risk it." "It's all right," I said, managing a small smile. "Take care of your family." He left quickly, leaving me sitting there with more clarity than comfort. The board wouldn't hear me. My team was scared into silence or bought off entirely. And now, Travis was working to destroy my reputation, making it nearly impossible for me to raise concerns without sounding bitter, unhinged, or out of touch. They thought they had me boxed in, but there was one thing they'd overlooked. During my last few days at Meridian, while everyone assumed I was quietly packing up and fading out, I'd done something standard for transitions, created a temporary emergency admin account on the audit server. Nothing sneaky, nothing outside protocol. It was normal during system transfers. Only no one thought to deactivate it. And I still had access. It wouldn't last forever. Someone would eventually notice. But for now, it was a lifeline, a way to verify what I suspected, to build something indisputable, not rumors, not accusations, evidence. The access wouldn't last forever, but maybe, just maybe, it would be enough. That night, I logged into Meridian's audit server using the emergency credentials I'd quietly created before leaving. I knew someone would eventually notice and shut down the account, so I moved fast. Every path I had previously flagged, I followed with fresh intensity. What I uncovered made my earlier concerns seem almost naive. Alpine Innovations wasn't just a shell, it was the nucleus of a larger network. Dozens of interconnected holding companies, funneling transactions back and forth in patterns clearly designed to obscure their origin. Some of the paper trails stretched back before Travis Mercer had ever set foot at Meridian. This wasn't opportunistic theft. It was a calculated, deliberate infiltration. The deeper I went, the clearer the picture became. Travis hadn't been hired despite his unimpressive resume. He'd been installed. His former startup, the Silicon Valley outfit that had generated more hype than revenue, had been funded by the same private investment group that recently acquired 3 seats on Meridian's board. One of those seats was now held by Jacob Foster, William Foster's nephew, appointed just 6 months ago. This wasn't about modernizing finance. This was about bleeding Meridian dry under the illusion of innovation. By dawn, I had downloaded and organized everything I could find. The numbers were staggering. More than $12 million had been siphoned from various departments. Inflated vendor contracts, payments for non-existent services, consulting fees routed through foreign intermediaries. A web of deceit, with Alpine Innovations sitting squarely in the middle. I made coffee and stepped out onto the back porch, watching the first pale gold light rise over the Ohio River. Patricia and I had bought this house for the view. "Water settles your overthinking brain," she used to say. She was right. The river moved steadily, flowing forward, never back. It helped me think. At first, I considered going back to the board quietly, reaching out to them like a dutiful soldier. But this wasn't just about Travis or Zachary anymore. It went deeper. Some of the board had to know, which explained why they'd pushed Diana out so quickly and embraced Travis so eagerly. I needed to be smarter, more surgical. That morning, I began mapping connections between board members, shell companies, and past associates of Travis. By early afternoon, 3 names stood out. Elaine Morrison, a retired manufacturing executive, brought in to bring balance to the board. She'd come from a competitor and had no known ties to Travis. David Patel, representing the Workers' Pension Fund, sharp, detail-focused, and deeply respected by the union. And Anthony Wilson, the board's longest-serving member. Quiet, steady, and unlikely to be caught up in flashy schemes. 3 people who might still believe in what Meridian had once stood for. Then I found something I'd missed. Zachary Hughes, the financial prodigy brought in to replace me, had once been a founding partner at Vertex Solutions, one of the so-called vendors siphoning money through Alpine. His name had been scrubbed from recent records, but in the original incorporation documents filed 3 years ago, there it was plain as day. The entire scheme was tighter than I'd realized. This wasn't Travis and Zachary taking advantage of chaos. This was the plan all along. Just as I began organizing this new discovery, my phone rang. The number was blocked, but I answered anyway. "Is this Hunter Donnelly?" a woman asked. "Speaking. My name is Vanessa Taylor. I'm with the Securities and Exchange Commission Enforcement Division." My pulse jumped. "We've received an anonymous tip about potential financial misconduct at Meridian Manufacturing," she continued, "specifically involving its current leadership team. The information suggested you might have relevant insights." I paused, choosing my words carefully. I recently stepped down as CFO after 15 years with the company. "Yes, we're aware," she said. "Would you be willing to meet informally to discuss certain transactions from the last 6 months? Who else knows you're calling?" "No one outside my immediate team," she said. "This is preliminary, not a formal investigation yet." I stood in the kitchen, staring at the darkened screen of my laptop. Going to the SEC would blow this wide open. It would be public. Fast. Meridian stock would nosedive. Headlines. Dang. Investigations. People like Bethany and Kevin would be caught in the fallout. Employees who had nothing to do with this might lose their jobs, their pensions, everything. But someone had already tipped them off. The clock was ticking now. The clock was ticking. I'll need some time, I said carefully. Time for what, Mr. Donnelly? To make sure I get this right. I gave myself 3 days. First priority, protect the evidence. I copied all my documentation, every file, every trace, to multiple secure cloud locations. I encrypted each one with rotating passkeys and built-in deadman switches. If I didn't log in and enter a code every 48 hours, the entire package would be sent automatically to the SEC, the Department of Justice, and 3 financial journalists I respected. People who would know what to do with it. Next came the outreach. I drafted 3 carefully worded emails to the board members I believed were still clean: Elaine Morrison, David Patel, and Anthony Wilson. I didn't name names or accuse anyone outright. Instead, I expressed concern about troubling financial patterns I'd noticed during my final weeks. I attached select pieces of evidence, just enough to raise real doubts without overwhelming them with noise. The emails were scheduled to send in 48 hours. The final and most delicate task involved someone I trusted. I reached out to Bethany and asked if she'd be willing to meet me for coffee. She agreed immediately. They're gutting our department, she told me the moment we sat down. Her voice was low, tight. Zachary says it's part of consolidating financial operations, but half of us got reassignment notices. The rest are being reviewed. She glanced down at her cup, blinking quickly. Including me. I let her breathe for a moment. 22 years at Meridian, and suddenly she was labeled redundant. I've got 6 weeks to find another role internally, she added. Or, I'm out. I gave her time, then said, Bethany, do you remember the audit protocol we implemented after the Jackson acquisition? The secondary verification channel. She frowned for a second, then nodded, her eyes widening. You mean the parallel audit trail? The one that automatically mirrors all transactions over $50,000 to the secure server? That's the one. Is it still active? As far as I know, it's hard-coded into the infrastructure. Zachary's team would need to know it exists in order to disable it. And who currently has access to that mirror? Senior audit staff, she said. And Zachary, I guess, since he's CFO now. What about archiving? I asked. Is the backup still sent to Iron Mountain on the 1st of every month? She thought for a moment, then nodded. Yes, that's automated too. The October backup should have been sent last week. Perfect. Even if Travis and Zachary realized what I was doing and tried to scrub the records, the originals were already sitting off-site, protected, time-stamped, and immutable. Bethany, I said gently, I'm going to ask something important. You are under no obligation. You can say no. I slid a sealed envelope across the table. And there is a formal report outlining financial concerns you, as a senior accounting manager, are obligated to report to internal audit. It only references information you would have had legitimate access to in your role. If you choose to submit it, they cannot retaliate against you without triggering whistleblower protections under federal law. Her hand shook slightly as she picked up the envelope. Is this why they're really pushing me out? Because I might have noticed. Probably, I said. But if you file that report, it creates an internal record that can't be ignored. It forces the audit team to look into the exact transactions I've already documented elsewhere. Bethany took a deep breath, straightened her posture, and tucked the envelope into her bag. When? Tomorrow morning would be best. On the way home, I made 2 final stops. First, at a notary public, where I signed and authenticated a sworn affidavit detailing everything I had discovered. Dates, figures, names, and corresponding documentation. Second, at my attorney's office. I left a sealed envelope marked to be opened only in the event of my death or incapacitation. Inside was a copy of the affidavit, along with credentials to access the encrypted evidence packages. That evening, my phone lit up with a text from Kevin. Z's asking lots of questions about old audit protocols. Seems nervous. Watch yourself. They were starting to realize their mistake. They'd been so focused on forcing me out, they hadn't stopped to think what I might have already seen or what I might have already saved. The wheels were turning. All I had to do now was wait. Exactly 6 weeks after I'd left Meridian, it all came apart at once. Internal audit, legal, HR, the board. Everything detonated. Bethany's formal complaint hit Zachary's desk the same morning my scheduled emails landed in the inboxes of Elaine, David, and Anthony. By noon, Elaine Morrison had used her authority as audit committee chair to call an emergency board meeting. I wasn't in the room, but Bethany kept me updated through quiet text throughout the day. 2 p.m., board meeting starting. Travis looks rattled. Zetas got pulled into a side room with legal. 3:10. Internal auditors just arrived. Took over the main conference room. By early evening, the news broke inside Meridian. The company was under internal investigation for financial misconduct. Every executive who had joined under Travis's leadership was placed on administrative leave pending a full forensic audit. I turned off my phone and walked along the river, watching the Cincinnati skyline flicker to life as dusk settled. For the first time in months, I felt my shoulders ease. Not joy, not vindication, just release. The next morning, I saw 3 missed calls. William Foster, Travis Mercer, Jacob Foster. I ignored them all. Then another call came in from Anthony Wilson, the board's most senior member. 15 years of clean books, he said, his voice gravelly and slow. No scandals. No mistatements. No miss. I should have spoken up when they pushed you out. You're speaking up now, Anthony, I said. That's what matters. The board has asked me to serve as acting chairman until we clean this up. William and Jacob have resigned. 2 others followed. Travis and Zachary have been terminated for cause. I said nothing. We'd like you to come back, Hunter. Just temporarily. Help the forensic team make sense of everything and stabilize the company. I watched a barge move steadily down the Ohio, slow, deliberate, unbothered by the turbulence around it. I'll help with the investigation, I said, but I'm not coming back for good. May I ask why? Because, I said with a small smile, Meridian needs someone who can innovate, and I'm just a little too old school for that. 3 months later, I sat on the porch of my new cabin in Asheville, North Carolina, watching the sun drop behind the Blue Ridge Mountains. It wasn't large, 2 bedrooms and a small office, but it was quiet, it was mine, and the view made up for anything it lacked. The investigation into Meridian had confirmed everything I'd uncovered. The scheme was broader than even I had suspected, a coordinated effort to siphon money through false vendors, padded contracts, and empty consultant fees. Travis, Zachary, and several board members were now facing federal charges for embezzlement and securities fraud. I had stayed long enough to assist the forensic accounting team. 6 weeks of spreadsheets, timelines, and document trails. Then I packed up a Cincinnati house and left it behind. Patricia and I'd always talked about retiring in the mountains. She would have loved this porch, this view, this quiet. Meridian's settlement for my consulting time had been more than fair. It paid for the cabin outright and left me with more than enough to live simply and well. I'd made one condition: no press appearances, no interviews, no victory laps. That had never been my style. My phone buzzed. A message from Bethany. Got the promotion. Director of Accounting. New CEO wants to rebuild everything, this time with a clean slate. I smiled and tapped back. Well-deserved. And never forget the parallel audit trail. The day before, my lawyer called. The SEC had closed its case against Meridian after the company agreed to broad governance reforms and paid financial penalties. Importantly, none of the costs fell on shareholders or everyday employees. That was the right outcome. As twilight spread across the hills, I opened the leather portfolio Patricia had given me long ago. Inside was a faded photo of us at the lake house, the last summer before her diagnosis. You were right, I said softly to her smiling face. I should have made more time for views like this. Tomorrow I drive into town to meet with the director of a local nonprofit. They needed help organizing their books. Just good, honest accounting for people doing work that mattered. Nothing flashy. Some might call that old school. I just called it integrity.